views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Hello, welcome to Theater for Ideas, and this is a very special show. A month ago, I did a community forum called Homeless in the City of Churches, and everyone here except one guest was there and spoke, and I thanked them all, and the object of that program was to gather ideas on the homeless situation in Fort Wayne, which has since gotten worse because I read that homeless children are increasing in Fort Wayne. I find that totally unacceptable. And in the process of preparing for that program, Theater for Ideas program, I got in touch with our guest tonight, Lloyd Pendleton. Lloyd is from Salt Lake City, Utah. That's where he lives now. And the last 10 years, he has been working to eliminate chronic homelessness in the state of Utah. He has housed he being with lots of help, over 1,300 people. And these are in nice apartments. And he's on track to eliminate chronic homelessness. And he's here on the phone, will be in a minute, to tell us how he did that, how we might do it in Fort Wayne. I know Fort Wayne is different from Salt Lake City, but in many ways it's similar. So, Lloyd, welcome. Lloyd Pendleton calling in from Salt Lake City, Utah. And Lloyd, while you're on the phone, I'm going to introduce our guest, starting with Reverend Terry Anderson. I've known Terry a long time. He's a longtime champion of human rights, including the homeless, giving voice to all kinds of marginal people. Liz Turkette, I just met recently, basically at the forum, and Liz spoke, I thought, very eloquently about Food Not Bombs and providing homeless shelter for our homeless population. And the goal of that forum and tonight is how we can do what Utah is doing. And Liz also gave a presentation briefly in the question answer session of at City Council, and I was very impressed with that.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. And Helmke is, I've been told, knows more about the homeless situation in Fort Wayne than anybody. And that's a compliment, but also sad, because it means that situation has been going on and on and on and on. And you started a house called Vincent Village, and you're the retired director. And Patty Hunter has her own show here on public access called Patty's Page. And she also works with me in Three Rivers Art Center for Kids called TRACK, using the power of art to combat child abuse. And one reason I got so interested in the homeless situation is the homeless children. And to me, that is abuse. I have a daughter. I just could not imagine her. I mean, I'd rather be homeless than have my daughter homeless, that's for sure. And then I really welcome Mitch Harper, because I invited all the city council, and I should say Terry Anderson is a candidate for city council, and I won't say anything more about that. He can. And Mitch is on the Common Council, I guess is the official name. He's also running for mayor in the coming election for our city. And I've known Mitch a long time, and I'm just thrilled all of you are here. I think this is a historic show. I really appreciate Lloyd Pendleton calling in. And so Lloyd, that's our guest. I think you've had a chance to meet them while we were setting up. So could you tell us a little bit about Housing First and how that came about in Utah?
Sure. Excuse me, be glad to. And thank you for the opportunity to
Sorry, I got a frog in my throat, to participate with you in this panel.
Thank you very much.
We became aware of the Housing First model back in 2003. We attended a conference where Sam Simbaris from New York City came and spoke. Then we came back to Utah and started to put together a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness. It took us about a year and a half, 2 years to put that together because it was a kind of a fit and start and back and forth. But I had the opportunity to meet Sam Simbaris at a conference in Las Vegas. It was on homelessness. And I met him in June of 2005. I had a chance to talk to him, in May of 2005. We brought him out in June to Utah to talk to us about it. And we decided, okay, is Salt Lake any different than New York City? Earlier you commented Fort Wayne is different than Salt Lake City. But basically pretty much the same. The principles apply. And so we decided that we would do a pilot to test this idea of housing first, and while we build 100 units. And so we found 17 of the most challenging, difficult, chronically homeless people we could find. We set aside some existing money, and we developed some contacts with landlords and did a scattered site model, and we housed them while we built this 100 units. Now, the national average is that 85% will still be housed after 12 months. 22 months later, all 17 of ours were housed. And since we had chosen the most challenging ones we could find, it proved to us that the Housing First model worked, and that you could take them right off the street and put them right into housing. And so it made us believers. And so from that pilot, over that 2-year period, we really moved forward and got a lot of housing. About 2,000 units of permanent supportive housing, single site and scattered site. And we've been able to then get hundreds, thousands into housing. So that's how we got involved. Now, I understand one of you talked about the Housing First approach. There's a basic set of assumptions, which was a shift from what normally we had thought about in the old model of housing homeless persons. So you basically, in the Housing First, you take them right off the street, as I mentioned, you put them right into housing, and then you have case management come and work with them. And it's much more effective treating them in housing than on the street or in the shelter, and case managing them. Now, one of the things that a lot of the publicity that we have received has said, Utah gives free housing to the homeless. And I've told every one of those that have interviewed me, it's not free housing. They have to pay 30% of their income or $50, whichever is greater. And they can be evicted for not paying the rent. So there is some accountability that comes with this housing.
Do you train them?
Pardon?
Do you train them to get jobs and stuff?
Right. And so we have housing first, employment second.
Right.
So now that they get into housing, get stabilized, reduce their addictions, case managers work with them. And then we've done a pilot with housing, or with employment, and we then have modified how we do our employment. We get them out. We have employment on site for the single site facilities. And we've been able to do a lot of work in getting them income in addition to their disability insurance or veterans pension or whatever that they're eligible for.
So, Floyd, they have to have income to get into Housing First?
No, we'll scholarship them for a couple of months.
Okay.
What about the mentally ill who are homeless? How can
Most
they?
of the 40% have mental health issues.
Yeah. Oh,
40 to 50% have substance abuse issues.
right.
So we are taking the mentally ill right off the street, putting them into housing.
That's good.
It doesn't mean that they're unemployable, though, because they have mental problems, you know?
So do you help them get Social Security if they have fallen through the cracks?
Yeah.
Correct. So we have a SOAR, the training where we've trained our case managers so that they can work with them to fill out the application. We also have a centralized state effort. If they get on, we have general assistance here. When they get on general assistance long term, then we have people that are trained that will work with them in order to get their application completed and submitted to the Disability Determination Agency to get them on disability insurance.
Wow.
What would, other than not paying rent, what would exit a person out of a housing for
The same
for-
reason you would be evicted. Why would you be evicted?
You what?
Why would you be evicted if
No.
you were renting?
Why would I be evicted?
He's
Sure,
asking
would
the
anyone
same.
be evicted?
Yeah,
Oh,
he's saying
same
the same
reasons
reason.
apply.
so the same. Okay.
Yeah, you don't
Sure,
pay
if
the
you-
rent. You
Well, he said not paying
Yeah,
rent, but I
but
wondered if
you
there
mean
were other
other
rules
things.
that
Sure, if
with the
they-
housing that would get the tenants evicted.
Sure, if they're going around beating up their neighbors or being threatening,
Yeah.
they can be. I mean, they'll be worked with, but if they continue that, they will be evicted for threatening their
Okay.
neighbors.
That makes sense.
Do most of
So
the
basically, on the housing first model, you treat them just like anyone else who rents a unit.
do you work with foster children who are thrown out 18, whatever age they are? They are in foster homes and they're on the street. They don't have a job or anything like that. Do you help those kids?
We have some units that have been set aside for street youth that are homeless.
Oh, yeah.
About a third of those, to 40%, have been in the foster care system. But we really haven't focused on them because the effort was chronically homeless housing.
Yeah.
Now the federal agency, or the federal HUD's effort is, or focus is that by 2020, the families and homeless youth need to be housed. So that's the next thrust.
That's great.
That's
So they
good
don't
news,
fall
Terry.
victim to people who try to force them into prostitution and stuff.
Yeah,
That they-
we provide services, we work with them, but we don't have a lot of housing. We do have probably 35 to 40 units that they can go into, and we carved some of that out, but that has not been a primary focus. It now
Right.
needs to become a primary focus,
Yeah.
because one of the problems I find anywhere, you can go to an area and everybody wants to do everything at the same time. And there are a lot of issues and needs out there. You've got homeless youth that are runaway, you've got women that are being trafficked, you've got all kinds of issues, and you basically can become overwhelmed and not get anything done significantly. So the advantage, what we saw, is that we really focused on the chronically homeless, and we've disciplined the system and repurposed money to achieve that goal, and it has greatly streamlined our whole overall delivery system for the homeless services.
Lloyd, when you say you've repurposed money, what would be some of the income sources available to your program before that have changed in focus?
Okay, there's the continuum of care, which comes from HUD. Are you all familiar with that?
HUD?
Some of us are, yes.
Some of us are, not all of us.
What's that called? What does that mean?
Continuum of care is a plan to end homelessness.
Oh.
And it's money that comes directly from HUD to the agencies, and so the state of Indiana gets every year about $13 million of money that comes into all of your homeless service providers in the state of Indiana.
Right.
So HUD has been repurposing that and reprioritizing that. Here in Utah, we have a homeless trust fund that's funded from a tax checkoff and general funds from our legislature. We have a critical needs housing. We have some block grant money. We have home money, that's just federal money. And so when we started this, and I went around the state and told people that we were going to end chronic homelessness in 10 years, they said, give us more money and we'll be able to do it. And I said, no. If we gave you more money, you'd continue doing the same things you've been doing, and that has not solved the problem.
That's right. That's right. I hear you.
I'm not willing to go to funders or private foundations or to the legislature and say, give us more money, we want to start this new program. I said, we're going to take the next couple of years and we're going to repurpose funds and move it towards our new vision, which is getting chronically homeless people housing opportunities. So we took money away from some good programs. They were doing some good work, no question on that. That was not the issue. But those programs where we've been putting money were not achieving the new vision that we had of ending chronic homelessness.
Oh.
So we took money away from them and put it into the chronic homeless effort. And there was weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. But we had to make the tough decision in order to get this achieved. And so then after we had repurposed that, then I was willing to go to funders and say, all right, if you invest $1 million or $500,000, here's what we can deliver for you, because these are the results we're getting with the existing funding that we have.
So, Floyd, for the purpose of people who don't understand what chronic homelessness actually is,
Yeah.
could you go ahead and give them a definition?
I can. It's the HUD definition, and it's defined as an adult, so 18 and over, that has a disabling condition, so some mental health, substance abuse, physical, some disabling condition, that's been homeless a year or more, or 4 times in 3 years. So it's kind of the stereotypical homeless guy. Most of them are guys, about 75% are men.
Well,
So, and what they also found, research found, that this population, which represents about 10% of the homeless population, will also spend lots of nights in the shelters that are available, will spend lots of nights in the jail, will go to the emergency room a lot, and have a lot of interaction with the police, and they can cost the community $40,000 to $20,000 a year per person on the street.
Mm-hmm.
and for housing,
Pardon?
and the difference for housing when
And
you
for
do
housing, for us, it's around $10,000 to house them.
Oh,
We did a study here. It's about $20,000 on the street per person, and we can house them for about $10,000. And so economically, you can make your case. But more importantly, humanity, they're now housed and off the street and out of the emergency room and out of the jails.
and get their dignity back.
Yeah.
Lloyd, when you began, what was your role? Were you working for state government or city government? Were you representing a nonprofit, or were you starting off as someone who was in the community and concerned about the homeless issue?
Okay, I worked for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the LDS Church, or the Mormon Church, whatever you know us by. And in working in that welfare department for the LDS Church, I had been loaned out twice to some nonprofits. One of them was the largest shelter in the city, and I went in and spent a year helping turn them around and getting them on their feet. They were having financial struggles. That got me exposed to the nonprofit world, and them exposed to me. So when this 10-year plan started, and our governor was involved in signing up the state for it, it wasn't coming together that in late 2003 and early 2004. So they went to the governor and asked that I be loaned out as a loaned executive from the LDS Church to the state. So I was loaned out on a part-time basis. I was still doing my full-time job at the LDS Church and doing this on a part-time basis for 2.5, almost 3 years. When I retired from LDS employment, then the state offered me a job, and I've been at the state 9 years, implementing our plan that we got approved in April of 2005. So I don't have a social service background. I worked for Ford Motor Company for 14 years in finance. I was at the LDS Church in finance, plus ran some operations. So I came in from a different perspective, not as social worker, but more as let's get something done, let's take a look at the financial issues. And so for the last 9 years, my total job has been wake up each morning, how do I bring people together? How do we get more housing? How do we get the services? And repurpose funds in order to bring people together to achieve this goal of a 72% reduction in our chronic homeless count since 2005.
What entities in the city did you pull together to get this whole project going?
Okay, the city, the county, the homeless shelter, we have a large one here, the Volunteers of America, the 2 major housing authorities, state people, and community advocates. And so we basically pulled together various groups. We also have a state homeless coordinating committee, and we went and restructured that so we had cabinet level people on it, and the lieutenant governor chaired it. We went to the governor and says, we'd like to have these changes made, and she made it happen.
So you had to reshuffle the whole gamut and become what you are right now.
What was the first part of that?
Did you have to reshuffle the whole council, government in Utah itself to reassemble yourself to what you're doing now?
Yeah, we made some pretty major changes. We didn't take everybody off the State Homeless Coordinating Committee, but a lot of the people there were service providers allocating the State Homeless Trust Fund. But we brought the lieutenant governor in, and we had cabinet level people at the policy level on this committee. And then the continuum of care, we have 3 in the state like you do. You have 3.
Yeah.
We have representation from them. We have representation from business and banks, faith-based organizations. So yes, we basically restructured that pretty dramatically and then created subcommittees and put the people on those subcommittees that had been on the State Homeless Coordinating Committee. And there was some weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth there also because they didn't want to go off the committee. We said, well, we'll put you on a subcommittee.
What was the time frame? How long did it take you to get this done?
Well, you mean these reorganizations?
To just pull to get the project going, the actual Housing First project.
Oh, well, we became aware of it in June or May, and in June we pulled together the committee, and by August 11th we had 5 people housed, so 2 or 3 months.
That's awesome.
So in 2 months?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
We did our pilot.
Lloyd, I have a couple related questions for you, I think. One is that you are some time into this now in making this transition from the traditional model to the Housing First model. We have some relatively short-term facilities in Fort Wayne, but they are not the Housing First model. I think one of our struggles is one that I'm sure that you encountered as you've described it, and that is, how do we let go of the good things that we're doing now to move to what might be an even better model? And I guess, is the leverage of repurposing money the only way to do that, or what other ways have you found to be useful to you in making that transition? And 2, some related, sometime into this now, in your work with the more chronic population, have you seen any generalizing of this into other homeless situations, families, and others?
Sure, okay. Remind me that second. The first one.
If I can.
The first one, what we did, we found pilots became very important. So, okay, if I would come to Fort Wayne and spend a year there, one of the first things I would do is I'd go around and find out who all the players are, and I'd get them together, and then I would say, all right, let's carve out some existing money, $150,000, $200,000, and you've got to have somebody who is willing to go and bite the bullet and carve out some money. And then you do a pilot. And then you say, all right, it's going to be low cost, low risk. You know, we're only going to do 20 people. We're going to do Housing First. And we're going to do a scattered site. Because you can launch that in 3 months. You find landlords who are willing to rent to them. You get case managers. And you begin to practice and work on that. Then you get your housing authority to say, all right, would you be willing to go and build 100 units? Get tax credits. It's going to take them a couple of years, 2.5 years. But while you're doing the pilot, they're putting together some of the housing for a single site situation. So that's I mean, it was tough because we took money away from existing resources and did pilots, but it changed the dynamics of the discussion around the new model. And basically, we didn't for those that were doing the homeless services, we didn't take much of that away. It was the things that were kind of like, we had a few $100,000 going to agencies that said, somebody's now become disabled in the home, and if we don't widen their bathroom and make it ADA and put in a ramp, they will become homeless. So we had given money to those agencies for years. But now we said, well, they're not chronically homeless. They may not become homeless. We're going to take that money away and put it into the chronic homeless effort. So, but we kept the shelter services going. So we didn't really strip a lot out of the basic homeless services.
You didn't touch Social Security or anything like that?
Well, no, that's not ours to touch.
Okay.
I've got
Now, so that was the effort we put into in working with that. Now, to go to other elements, okay, what we found is that if we took a homeless person, a chronically homeless person out of the shelter, put him into or put her into a housing unit, we could put 10.7 people in that bed over the next 12 months. So we greatly increased the capacity of our emergency shelter by taking out the high users and putting them into housing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's striking in some of your material is that there's actually more money available for emergency kind of shelter services as a short-term solution,
Right.
as you then can make utilization of the Housing First model.
See, we had 14% of our shelter beds were consumed by, or 64% of our shelter beds were consumed by 14% of our homeless people. So this 10%, well, see, the basic research said that there's 10% of your homeless population are chronic, and yet they use 50 to 60% of the resources. We didn't know that we believed that, so we came back from that conference and we did a 5-year study on our homeless shelter and found it was 14 and 64. So we said, if we take, as we take these high users, these 400, 500 night users in the shelter over a 5-year period, we then will put them into housing. We can then use that as truly an emergency shelter rather than long-term housing for the chronically homeless.
So, Floyd, for your pilot, did you do rental properties or?
Right.
Okay, so you didn't acquire.
No. We just
Okay.
went to landlords and said, when we went to the landlords and proposed this pilot, what do you think their concerns were? I'm gonna take
I
it.
think, probably the same as what the opposition of people in the community, that you're
Sure.
going to house somebody that's got an addiction problem, or,
So
somebody
we-
that just
we
came out
said-
of jail.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so they said, well, I'm not going to pay rent. And I said, okay, we're going to master lease. The housing authority here will be the lease, will be the one on the lease, and they'll pay your rent every month. You get it no matter what.
Where do you get
Whether
these
somebody in the
houses?
house or not in the house.
The landlords, he said he
The landlords. What kind of housing? Just ordinary houses, or?
Yeah, just apartment complexes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So you go to landlord and say, all right, we will do a master lease. You'll get your rent. We've set aside money in our pilot to repair any damage that they will do. And if you have any problems with them, you call this number 24/7. There'll be a case manager assigned to Sam,
All
or that
right.
person in that unit.
Cool.
And Lloyd,
So we went through all those issues, and then when I made that presentation, I said, how many are willing to rent? And about 20 hands went up. And we asked them if they'd reduce their rent by $50 a month, and they said, sure. So we mitigated all of their issues, and so within 2.5, 3 months, we had our pilot launched and going in just regular apartment rentals.
Lloyd, did you have a metric on those agencies that were taking money for the potential homeless, the disabled person who had the ramp because they thought they may become homeless? Did you follow those people who had been identified and find out that either a percentage did become homeless, or that frankly that wasn't preventing any homelessness? That
We
those
did
folks
not,
found
because
other
we did not have a good homeless management information system, so we couldn't track that.
couldn't track that. And
Yeah,
we're
no, I mean, that would have been a nice piece to have done, but we're pretty comfortable that most of them wouldn't become homeless.
or would have found other sources
Right.
for that.
See,
that age.
researchers, and we did a random study here, random assigned study. Others have done the same thing. If you have a person come in and they say, I've been evicted, I have an eviction notice. So there's a lot of people who want to say, well, let us prevent you from being evicted because you'll become homeless. That makes lots of sense. But what research is showing, if you have 100 people come into you and say, I have an eviction notice, you could help all 100 and spend lots of money. Or you can say, let's wait and see who shows up at the shelter. And about 10% will show up at the shelter. But you don't know which 10 of 100 will show up at the shelter. So the answer to your second question that you asked earlier is we now have a rapid rehousing. So when somebody shows up at the shelter, especially families, we start the process to rapidly rehouse them and get them out of the shelter by 30 days into a unit. So we've processed about 4,000 families into rapidly rehousing them over the past 4.5 years.
Wow. Do you give them clothing or anything to start off with, or how do they? What if they don't have that much clothing? and stuff?
Clothing?
If they don't have that much clothing when you finally do get them in housing, do you help them out with their wardrobes or what?
Yes, okay. First of all, we will say, here's a family. We find a lot of them don't need financial assistance. They just need some connections, some case management to get out into place, and so a high percent will just go out without any financial. The remaining 50% will need some financial. So then about 8 to 10% of those will come back 2 or 3 times, and then we call it progressive engagement. We'll just give them a rent for a month or 2, and then we'll reassess and give them maybe a little less the 3rd month, a little less the 4th month. By the 5th month, they're pretty well off rental assistance. So that's progressive, rapidly rehousing using a progressive engagement model. Now, we have to go to your question on clothing, we have an arrangement with a local thrift store here that they get vouchers. And so if I move a family out of the shelter and move them into a housing unit, they can get a voucher and go to the thrift store and get beds and furnishings and couches and chairs and dishes and clothes in order to outfit their family and their apartment.
Do they have to pay you back from all the things that you give them?
Nope.
No, that's good. That's good.
Are all of the houses in the same area, or are they dispersed throughout the city?
They're dispersed.
Okay.
Did he say dispersed?
Yes. Now, I had an idea. I actually had went to the city council here in Fort Wayne and talked to them about Housing First, the program that you've implemented,
Yes.
and then kind of brought up the Blight program that we're going to be receiving funding for, or have received funding for, I'm not sure. And I read an article that not all of the houses, there were about 1,000 or so homes in Fort Wayne that they could basically demolish with that money. But all of them weren't necessarily deemed up for demo, like they didn't need to be demolished. They could be refurbished and be homes. What do you think about, would it be possible for us to use that money and start housing the homeless? Is that something that we could do? Because I don't know anything about politics or laws, or if we could use that money to do that with some of those homes.
Can you help her, Mitch?
Well, Lloyd, if I can ask a kind of a corollary to that too, did the repurposing of any money require waivers from the federal government?
No, this was primarily our homeless trust fund money.
This was your state money that you had control over.
Which we
Right.
don't have in Indiana, by the way, Floyd.
Then we have to change.
To dovetail with Liz's question, were you using any housing that might have become publicly available, sheeted to the city because it had become vacant or abandoned?
No, we did not do that. We basically went to regular apartments, landlords, because that was not something we wanted to take on.
Yeah.
Because we want to get this thing up and going. And so here again, you need to take a look at what your options are and your resources are. See, to me, the question would come up, if you're going to go and do abandoned homes, you're going to need to put in $15,000 or $20,000 to rehab them.
Right.
And then somebody's going to need to own them.
Mm-hmm.
So you get into a whole issue of property management. Now, if your housing authority is willing to do that they will be willing to take that on, but that's a longer-term process.
Right. Okay.
And if you want to get your chronically homeless housed, to me, I would steer away from that as your initial effort. But if you have that many units over there and you want to upgrade them, then the city says, all right, let's take 50 homes and invest some money and upgrade them, and then basically you would probably want those to be sold to new first-time home buyers.
I just don't want to see
And
vacant lots
and the
all over
homeless,
the place.
chronically homeless people, generally, they won't have money, and your homeless families won't have money to buy.
Right.
So to me, rehabbing homes and putting them on the market, and then you want homeowners there who'll take care of it, and they get their families there, that's a different solution. I think that's a great one, but that's a different market.
Okay.
That's a poverty situation.
Yeah.
Lloyd,
Not
can
a
you
homeless
I'm
situation.
sorry. Can you say a little bit more about the case management process that you're using in terms of, you talked about employment. What other factors might be addressed? Budgeting, transportation, all of those things, that would be a part. And secondly, is that a time-limited process? Is that conducted by the same group that does Housing First primarily, or is that shared with other agencies? How does all that fit together?
Okay, for permanent supportive housing, that means you have case management there on site on a regular, forever going basis. And so permanent supportive housing means case management. Now we have the housing authorities own case managers or hire them. The homeless shelter has case managers that they put on site. Volunteers of America have case managers that be on site, depending upon what works best for the particular housing project or the scattered site project. So it's a collaboration among the homeless service providers. But most of the money for that comes through continuum of care or the state homeless trust fund.
So the case managers are community organizations that provide case management.
Correct.
And whatever happens to be the issue for the homeless, the person who's experiencing chronic homelessness, then they get a case manager from an agency that would specialize in that particular
Well, I
issue.
wouldn't say it's quite that specialized. The
Like addiction.
Case managers may have 1 to 20. We have one that has 1 to 50.
Okay.
And one of our larger facilities has, the ratio is 1 to 50 because we have 220 adults there and 50 to 70 children in that facility. So it's a big one. I don't know that we'd do another one like that. It's a remodeled hotel, former Holiday Inn.
So are there contracts with these agencies to?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. And so they will say, all right, we have some of our people coming from Volunteers of America or from the road home, the homeless shelter. They know our people. We'll put a case manager over there to work with them as they come over. They're tied in with the homeless shelter. So it's a combination. Is it's worked out what is best, who can serve them the most effectively. But the case managers are on site at the single site facilities.
Which is cool.
Then, if they need more treatment, if they need mental health treatment or serious substance abuse treatment, then they plug them into the agencies that do that kind of treatment.
Right. Okay.
The mental health providers, which is the county here, substance abuse, which is usually a nonprofit or for-profit. So they'll move them into those treatment programs.
Do you help out with the medical, like operations or whatever, you know?
And then we have a homeless clinic here.
Yeah.
So they treat about 4,000 unduplicated homeless individuals. And when they move into permanent supportive housing, they still consider them homeless and still treat them.
Right.
So they have medical doctors, nurses, they have a dental clinic. And so they go there to get their basic medical treatments. Now, if they need to go to a hospital for surgery, they'll work with the hospital to get them in for the surgery and then work with them on a respite when they come out.
Yes. Anyone else?
Now, did I answer all the questions? Somebody asked something. I think
Lloyd, I think I may have one more. If so, in your first sort of flush at dealing with chronic homelessness, and dealing with folks who've had intractable homelessness for multiple years, once those folks were taken care of, assuming that there's additional chronic homelessness, is there sort of a steady state or steady rate of folks who fall into that classification afterward, and it's steady, or is that growing?
we don't quite know that.
Excluding the families and the
there's
children.
There's 2 or 3 pieces of that. We're down to where we're getting close to a functional zero.
Okay.
Because there are many choices people make, alcohol, drugs, or they may come in from out of state. So they're the transients. They say, well, I like it in Salt Lake, I'm going to stay here. But they've been homeless a long time. So there will be those, so there is that flow. But also, a lot of them are housing resistant. The mental health issues are such that they do not want to go into 4 walls and a roof.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I've heard of a story in Houston where they had one fellow living under the bridge, and they were not contacting him every day. And the 753rd visit, he said, "Okay, I'll come in."
Wow.
So our goal is, and our vision statement is, that everyone has access to safe, decent, affordable housing with the needs and resources and supports for self-sufficiency and well-being. As a community, we want to be able to go out and identify the chronically homeless very quickly, give them a meaningful housing opportunity, and if they choose not to come into the housing, then we will continue to outreach to them, but we will honor their choice. So that functional zero, we think, is going to be around 3 or 4 or 5% of our overall homeless count. Or we don't quite know that, because if you look at our chart, it's flattened out in the last 3 years. Since 2012, it's kind of gone flat with our chronic homeless. And we do need about 250 more homeless units, or chronically homeless, permanent supportive housing units. And then we think we will be there. Veterans, we have open beds now. We basically have reached functional zero for our veterans. And so there will be that flattening out, and as a community, we can't force them into housing. That's called jail. We want to have a system that identifies homeless families very quickly, homeless individuals very quickly, and gives them an opportunity to get housed and stabilized. And we're almost there.
New Orleans is, I do believe they're helping the homeless vets there.
Yeah, they've helped
Yes,
almost
they have
100%.
talked to Martha Cagle. January 2nd or 3rd, they had a news conference announced they had housed all of the homeless vets except about 8 that were housing resistant, and so they basically said, we've gotten them housed.
It's a
So
state.
that's all homeless vets. We have basically housed all of our chronically homeless veterans 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, but the ones that refused to come in. So we basically had achieved our chronic homeless number. But that's always moving. I mean, 3 weeks later you could be up or down. So it's the system that we have in place and want to have in place on an ongoing basis.
You know, we need more jobs in a lot of places in the United States. And a lot of people are becoming, homeless because they either get fired from a job or they get sick or gets a death in the family or some fire exhumes a house and they're homeless and all that. That's a lot of reasons why people do become homeless or they run away from home or something like that.
I think the root of that, though, is lack of compassion.
Okay, now one of the things, may I suggest, you can identify all kinds of issues and why people are homeless, but if you're going to, from at least our perspective and my perspective, you have to target what you're going to do, prioritize your resources, and focus on that, because then you can get an achievable result. If you try to solve poverty, prevent homelessness, and think of all those things that would be nice to do, you will just, you'll, at least my experience has been, you'll just kind of get frustrated and you won't get focused and achieve some goal. So you have in Indiana 542 chronically homeless individuals. That's all of Indiana, the whole state. We had almost 2,000 when we started in 2005. You have
What's the
542.
population?
Pardon?
What's the population down there?
Out there.
Down where?
Out there?
Are you just in Salt Lake City, or is this
No. Our numbers are statewide.
Ah.
It's a statewide.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, our reduction is statewide.
Wow.
So you have 542 reported in your last point in time count in 2014. So you probably have 150 chronically homeless people in Fort Wayne. I couldn't find your what continuing care are you? Are you in Balance of State or in the South Bend?
Balance of state.
Okay, I gathered that when I looked at the map. So you probably have maybe 100, 120 people chronically homeless in Fort Wayne. You can get those housed easily.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably not far off in my experience.
Yeah.
Right, but you need to target. You need to, because my guess is you can go to the jail and the sheriff can name off 20 of them. You can go to the police, they can name off 25. They can just give you the name. They're frequent flyers. And they go to the emergency rooms of the hospitals. They can give you 10 or 15 that are in there all the time. You start a pilot and you take from each of those high users and say, hospitals cough up some money, county give us some money, city give us some money, and we will house these 50 chronically homeless people that are high users of your system.
I understand that you, with a permanent supportive housing model, you're not necessarily looking for people to move beyond that. That's not
Oh,
necessary.
yeah, we are.
Okay, then please say something about that. That was going to be my question.
Okay. They can stay there and die there. It's permanent housing. But we want to work with them, stabilize them, help them get employment, get that, that stability back. And so we have about 10% a year that move out successfully, reconnect with family, connect with a significant other. About 10% move out. About 2% die. 2% will walk away, and about 6% will be evicted.
Wow.
Can you give an idea of some of the demographics, whether average or mean age, that sort of thing? You've given sort of the male.
Yeah, the male's about 65, 70%.
What age group?
Pardon?
What age group?
No, they're into the 40s and 50s. We have some in the 60s. We have about 50 to 70 that die a year, and the average age is 49, 52, 51.
That's young.
Even though more and more of them are now dying in permanent supportive housing. Fewer on the street. Because if they die in permanent supportive housing, we still count them as a homeless person who's died. And we've been tracking that since 2007, and so that's the average age. It's gone from 47 to 52. It's 49, 52, 50, 51, 49, 52 the last few years. And so it's pretty tough living on the street.
How about the younger ones? Do you see a lot of those?
The what?
See a lot of younger people in their 20s and teens?
You don't see them in the homeless system. They don't go to the homeless shelter. They basically
Couch
double,
surf.
triple bunk. They sell sex for housing. So there's all of those issues. Those are really complicated problems and challenges. But the youth do not go to the shelter because there's too many adults that get victimized, especially the girls. And so they basically blend into the community. And so we know that's an issue, and
they don't get
HUD is
counted.
doing some research to determine what are the best interventions. We just opened up a house last year for boys. So we're going to open up a shelter for the youth with some housing with it in about 14 months. So we're putting some stuff into that, but it's not enough yet.
One step at a time, man.
Well, that's it. And so when you start, I'm just going to say it again, when you start and you're a core of people who have an interest in this, but you've got to find your champion, you've got to set your goal, and then you repurpose and your funding to achieve that goal, and then it will help streamline your own system. You can't do it all at once.
I appreciate your challenge too. As we of course, like most places, don't think we probably do our point in time count well enough, and that it's an underestimate. So,
Sure it is.
but even if we said that there were 150 to 200 chronically homeless in our community, which I think is a pretty fair estimate, that could be a very important goal for a very useful goal for us.
Right.
We should be able to repurpose funds and find places for 150 to 200 people, and I think that would change the climate of care in our entire community.
Absolutely. And when you take the high users in the jail, the emergency rooms, and the police interactions, it will have a huge impact, visible impact.
Fort Wayne is changing its image, starting to legacy. Is that legacy, Mitch?
Pardon?
Legacy funds.
Legacy funds.
Part of it's legacy, but there's a general overall push from business community, from the city administration. I think from a lot of younger people. We've got some real.
So what's the population
not-
of Fort Wayne? I didn't look it up.
About 300,000.
Yeah, about
Yeah,
300,000.
county's about 330,000. Do you see this as something that can be driven by a municipality, or is at least the buy-in or direction have to come from the state and the state-administered programs?
Take your county. It can be done, but you go to Columbus, Ohio, Franklin County. They've done some marvelous work. And Ohio State's not at the table at all, from what I understand. But Franklin County's done some very wonderful things. So, did you have county commissioners or county
We do.
councils or what?
County commissioners are the executive, and there is also a county council as the fiscal body.
Okay, so basically, the fundamental thing is you need to find a champion at a high enough level that can kind of bring people together and pull in resources, help repurpose existing resources. And so to me, I'd go after the county mayor or executive, the mayor, a high-level businessman or two or woman who says, we want to make this happen. And you may want to go and get a loaned executive. You've got somebody who's at a large company there, about ready to retire, they've been an executive, they have a propensity for this. You say, would you keep them on your payroll and loan them out to us for a year, and let's put together a plan? And that person will go around and see some of the other areas, come out to Salt Lake, go to Columbus, Ohio, go to some, and see what the model is. And then you go back and you put together your plan and you get a pilot going and you make it happen. Also, one of the things that we do here, we do our point time count, which is about 3,000 on a single night. Then we annualize it. So if you look at our reports we put out, we have an annual number. So we have about 13,000 that we estimate will be homeless in Utah this year, or 2014. So we take the non-chronic times 5 and the chronic times 2, because you will handle about that many people over a year's time that will come and go through your system, because 80% of the homeless people are temporarily homeless, 30 to 40, 50, 60 days.
I have a question, Floyd. It's a statewide effort in Utah. Is there an umbrella organization that covers all of the back office and funding stuff?
Right,
for
the state.
Huh?
The state.
The state itself?
Yeah, we have the Homeless Management Information System here. It's the one system for all 3 continuum of care. It's managed out of the office I'm in.
And the HUD funds come to the state?
No, the continuum of care go directly to the agency, but we have them coordinate to local committees.
Okay.
And so that they prioritize that towards chronic homeless, in which the HUD is asking them to do. We then also will lay in our homeless trust fund to support and make the differences, provide the match. So it's a coordinated effort of the state funds and the HUD funds.
How about the governor? Is he involved too?
Well, our current governor used to chair a state homeless coordinating committee for 6 years.
Yeah.
So he's very supportive. But the lieutenant governor is the one that comes into the meeting and chairs it and hears the reports, etc.
So we just have to get everybody at the table and start brainstorming.
Right. And then make a decision and say, we're going to do a pilot and we're going to make something happen.
Right.
Because you can meet and pontificate ad infinitum.
Right. Yeah.
You need somebody
That's
that
what
says,
I
all right, in 6 months or 3 months, we're going to have 10 people or 15 or 20 people housed that are chronically homeless, high users, and now what do we need to do to get there?
Lloyd, we have about 5 minutes. I'm going to ask each guest just to make a closing comment and then give you the honor of closing the show. Mitch Harper, Fort Wayne Common Council, thank you for coming. I hope you'll be that champion or one of them.
And I appreciate your comments, Lloyd, in terms of having the metrics, in terms of where you've got management and you're measuring what's happening. And I appreciate that very much in terms of the strategies that it's measured, and as you've said, it's doable.
It's doable, absolutely.
Thank you, Mitch, very much. Patty?
Well, I'm I'm the executive director of TRAC, Three Rivers Arts Center for Kids, and we're here to help the homeless children as well as their parents, as well as the abused children here in neglect. But what we're doing here is brainstorming, and I think we should just get off our little butts and do it. And do it. That's what we have to do to help our fellow man here have more compassion and love.
Thanks. Ann? Helmke?
I really appreciate you coming to the table with us, so to speak, and telling us how you did your project. I know that we have at least one. We have, I think, a couple of Housing First programs in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
But I think that this whole coordinated effort could be a little tighter here, where we can actually move forward with a plan to end chronic homelessness. We have one. Every state has to have one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I really appreciate this, you sharing with us.
Thank you, Ann. Liz?
I guess I would like to say that it was great to meet you, so to speak, and I learned a lot. And this really made me realize that I guess it confirmed my opinion on the Housing First and that Fort Wayne should be doing it and that we could be more responsible with how we're spending our money. And so for that, I thank you. And yeah, that's all.
I appreciate your time as well. I too, like all of us, am an advocate and believer in compassion and love. But what I like about what you are doing there is using the data and finding some specific kinds of ways to take a bite out of things and give it some reality. And I think your model can be a helpful example for us to move forward. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Lloyd, I just want to say, I read that, like so many of us, that you had a change of attitude, that at first you thought, oh, these people just need jobs or they're lazy, and you came around to this great bundle of compassion. And Liz whispered to me, we need compassion. And that's where it all starts, don't you think? And I'm going to give you the last word. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I was raised on a small ranch in the West Desert of Utah, kind of a rugged individualist. And so when I would come into Salt Lake and see the homeless people, I would say, you lazy bums, why don't you get a job? Pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Yeah.
And when I got into this and began to take a look and see and hear their stories, I realized that they didn't have any boots to pull their bootstraps up by.
Yeah.
And so it helped me realize when I hear their story that most of them have had very traumatic childhoods, a lot of abuse, sexual, mental, physical, emotional, and we'd probably be in the same position they would be if we were reared in that family.
Mm-hmm.
So who is it me, and I'm a Christian, and how would Christ work with these people? He didn't go beat them up and tell them. He goes and like Mother Teresa. She goes and she nurtures them and gives them opportunities. Yes, there's a choice. Like the man who was at the pool said, take up your bed and walk. He still had to take up his bed and walk, had to have faith. But he was given the vision that he could do it. So there's a combination of compassion. And so we basically boil it down. You need to have champions, you need to have collaboration, and you need to have compassion. And you can make it happen.
What a great ending. Thank you. We've been talking with Lloyd Pendleton from Housing First, calling from Salt Lake City, a program that he heads for the state of Utah that has reduced chronic homelessness 72% in the last decade, on track to eliminate it, and with many plans still to keep going. So I want to thank Mitch Harper from Common Council, Fort Wayne, Patty Hunter from TRAC, and Helmke from Vincent's Village, Liz Turkette, Food Not Bombs, and Reverend Terry Anderson, Interfaith on the Homeless, for being the guest today, and you've all been great. And Lloyd, thank you again. And last comment, I hope you might be able to come to Fort Wayne and maybe give a talk, and we get all these people together. And
Be glad to.
thank
Yeah,
you.
that'd be great.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share what we're doing.
Thank you. I so appreciate it. You've been watching Theater for Ideas. I'm Terry Doran. Please do what you can to get the homeless person that you see out on the street help. Thank you. Good night.
Toward getting families out of shelters more quickly. Right. Okay. Because I think that kind of blended a little bit when we were talking.
We were talking.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, the rapid rehousing is to get them out. And
Yeah.
you just help them progressively engage so that they're on their own as quickly as possible.
And we had the courtyard. for the
The
aging
permanent
out
supportive
there.
housing is, you put them there, and they have a Section 8 voucher, and the case management goes ongoing.
Yeah.
It's just sort of formless.
Thanks.
There are ways to measure.
You're welcome.
And the zero in.
Any other questions?
The resources.
I think we're having our first discussion to get this going here.
Okay, well, good luck.
Okay, thank you very
Good
much.
night. Okay.
Thank you, Lloyd. God bless.